Inside North Korea, one of the most closed-off and tightly controlled countries in the world, there is a place even darker and more mysterious. It is hidden between high mountains, electric fences, and watchtowers. This is Camp 14, also known as Kaichon Internment Camp. It is a political prisoner camp where many are sent, some are even born inside, but almost no one comes out alive. Comparing this to the Soviet gulags or the Nazi concentration camps of the Third Reich is not an exaggeration. This is a place specifically built to punish, isolate, and ultimately destroy people whom the North Korean government considers enemies of the state. The only difference is that by 2026, the world still knows very little about what is truly happening there. And don't expect to hear about this place on a guided tour in North Korea. The country's government strongly denies its existence. According to them, this is just a lie and foreign propaganda meant to discredit their regime. But satellite images show otherwise. Here you can see a vast area surrounded by fences, watchtowers, armed guards, landmines, large farms, industrial facilities, and sections that are completely isolated from the rest of the country. And then there are the accounts of the few people who managed to escape from this place. They described Camp 14 as a hell deliberately created by the North Korean state, a closed world where hunger is constant, forced labor is the norm, and violence is a part of daily life. What's even more disturbing is that Camp 14 is not an isolated case. It is just one part of a broader system of punishment that exists in North Korea. In this video, we will try to piece together from evidence and testimonies how it works and what really happens in one of the darkest places in North Korea. But before we begin, if you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. The official name of this camp is Kwanli-So, number 14 or Camp 14. This is not an ordinary prison or part of a clear and transparent judicial system. Camp 14 is a penal colony for political prisoners. In North Korea, it is part of a network of camps known as Kwanli-So, camps managed by the state security apparatus, and designed to permanently isolate people whom the regime considers enemies. Notice the phrase permanently isolate, because unlike other detention centers in North Korea, such as the Kyohwaso, which serve as re-education camps where, in theory, a prisoner can be released after serving their sentence, the Kwanli-So were not created to change a person's behavior. Their purpose is to make the people sent there disappear permanently. Usually, the people brought to the Kwanli-So have no fixed sentence length. They do not go through a real and public trial, and they do not know when or if they will ever be released. They are simply imprisoned for an indefinite period of time. In North Korea, even the smallest act considered against the state can be treated as a serious crime. And what's even worse is that it's not only the suspected offender who gets punished. There is a system called guilt by association, or being punished because of your connection to someone. When a citizen of North Korea is accused of treason, espionage, attempting to escape, engaging in religious activities, or even just having ideas considered contrary to the state's ideology, their entire family can be implicated. Their parents, children, siblings, and even grandchildren can be sent to the Kwanli-So. 3 generations of a family can be punished just because of the alleged crime of one person. In some cases, even future generations who have not yet been born may be made to grow up and spend their entire lives inside the camp. This system may seem extremely cruel and almost unbelievable, but there's plenty of evidence indicating that this is really happening. Of course, this is not written in North Korea's penal code, and the government never admits it publicly. But according to various testimonies from survivors and studies by experts on North Korea, this is reportedly how the system operates. It is believed that this system of political camps began to form in the 1950s and 1960s under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, the grandfather of Kim Jong-un. It was used as a tool to eliminate real or suspected enemies of the regime and to strengthen the ideological control of the new state. Over the years, this system was further expanded and strengthened by Kim Jong-il, and has been continued by Kim Jong-un up to the present. Despite the government's efforts to hide the entire network of these camps from the eyes of the world, information about them has continued to emerge over the past decades. Before Camp 14 became widely known, one of the most feared was Camp 22, located in the Hubeiryong region, near the border with China. For many years, it was known as one of the largest and most brutal camps in the country, where tens of thousands of prisoners were forced to work in mines and vast farms. Based on satellite images and testimonies from those who escaped from North Korea, it is believed that part of its facilities was dismantled around 2012, although there has never been any official confirmation from the government. In addition, Camp 15 in Yodok has also been identified, which has some of the most detailed testimonies from survivors, and Camp 16 in Hwasong, another high-security camp located in a remote and mountainous area. But in recent years, no camp has been more feared than Camp 14. It is considered the most brutal of them all. Camp 14 is located in a mountainous area in central North Korea, near the city of Kaicheon in South Pyongan province. Although it cannot be found on the country's official maps, satellite images clearly show the size of the camp and its facilities. This is not just an ordinary prison. It is an enormous complex that covers dozens, and according to some estimates, possibly even hundreds of square kilometers. The entire area is surrounded by electric fences, double-layered and in some parts even triple layers of strong wire fences. Along the perimeter there are watchtowers, armed guard posts, and in some areas landmines have been identified, as well as clear strips of land specifically designed to easily spot any footprints of possible escapees. Even nature itself serves as an additional defense for the camp. It is located in a mountainous area with steep slopes, extremely cold winters, and rough terrain, making it very difficult to escape without being noticed. There are only a few roads around the camp, and all of them are strictly guarded. Even if a prisoner manages to get past the electrified fences, he would still have to cross a vast land full of dangers before having any hope of escape. The location of Camp 14 in the middle of the mountains is not just to make it almost impossible for anyone to escape. It also has an economic purpose. Based on satellite images, you can see inside the camp coal mines, vast fields cultivated by the prisoners themselves, workshops, and even textile factories. This means that Camp 14 is not just a place of punishment. It is also an economic center that supports the North Korean state's production. This is also the reason why the government does not simply execute those it considers enemies or traitors. As long as they are still able to work, they remain useful as forced laborers, or, according to many reports, like slaves. Inside the camp, the prisoners live in simple barracks, rectangular buildings made only of basic materials with cement floors and almost no basic facilities. The areas for men and women are also strictly separated, and every movement and action of the prisoners is tightly controlled. Every movement and action is strictly controlled. No windows, underground facilities, and areas used for isolation. Based on the testimonies of survivors, it is believed that interrogations and various forms of punishment are carried out here. Although it is impossible to know exactly what happens inside these buildings, the drawings and accounts of former prisoners are enough to provide a horrifying picture of what they experienced. What truly sets Camp 14 apart from an ordinary prison is not just the severity of its rules, but also its vast size. It is a completely enclosed place, almost as large as a small town, entirely isolated from the rest of North Korea. Here, thousands of people are born, live, work, and are killed with almost no contact with the outside world. There are families inside the camp, but their lives are strictly controlled by the authorities. It is common for family members who were brought to the camp together to be separated in order to completely eliminate any form of private life and reduce the possibility of rebellion or resistance. In some cases, the marriage of two prisoners is not of their own choosing. This is approved or arranged by the camp authorities themselves as a reward for good work or good behavior. But even if marriage is allowed, there is still no real private life. Having children is not considered a right, but merely a part of the system to produce a new generation of workers. In Camp 14, forced labor begins when a person is still very young. They are made to work in coal mines, textile factories, and vast farms, where the hours are extremely long, and their workdays are extremely difficult. There is very little food inside the camp. The usual ration is just a bit of corn, watery soup, and if they're lucky, a small piece of bread. Because of this, hunger has become a part of every prisoner's daily life. According to some former prisoners, they witnessed public executions of people who were caught stealing just a few grains of corn to have something to eat. Public executions are regularly carried out. Often, it's not because of serious crimes, but even for minor offenses or any reason the authorities want to make an example of. All prisoners are forced to watch the executions to show that any violation, no matter how small, carries a heavy punishment, and to make them feel that the system is always watching. The same method is used in raising children born inside the camp. From childhood, they are taught to have complete loyalty to the system, to get used to forced labor, and to monitor even their fellow prisoners. Perhaps the most well-known former prisoner of Camp 14 is Shin Dong-hyuk. He was born inside the camp itself and grew up believing that was the entire world. He knew nothing about life outside or even the concept of freedom. According to his account, when he was just a teenager, he reported his own mother and brother after overhearing their plan to escape. As a result, their execution was carried out right in front of him. But instead of being rewarded, he also underwent severe torture. He experienced torture, physical injury, and a long period of imprisonment in isolation. After many years of forced labor and torture, the moment came when he decided to try something he had never thought of before. His perspective on escape changed when he met an older prisoner who had once experienced life outside the camp. He told him about the cities, about living freely, and most of all, about delicious food. Of everything he heard, what intrigued him the most was the food. The simple idea of eating grilled meat became enough reason for him to risk his life just to escape. In January 2005, while working near the camp fence, Shin Dong-hyuk and his companion carried out their plan. It was winter then, and the ground was frozen, so it was impossible to dig under the electric fence. When they reached the fence, his companion tried to cross first, but the moment he touched the wires, he was immediately electrocuted and killed. His body was left hanging on the barbed wire. In a moment of utter desperation, Shin used his companion's body as a bridge. He climbed over it and, despite the enormous danger, managed to cross to the other side and finally escape from Camp 14. Shin Dong-hyuk suffered severe injuries to his legs, but despite this, he managed to get out of the camp's grounds. For several days, he wandered through the forests and mountains until he reached a nearby village. But his escape did not end there. He was still inside North Korea, a country known for its strict surveillance, where almost any citizen could report on their fellow citizens. For weeks, he slowly moved north. He stole food to survive, hid in the forests, and avoided military checkpoints and patrols. In the end, he successfully crossed the Tumen River into China, which marked the beginning of his long journey. After a few years, he finally made it to South Korea. When he escaped, Shin was already 23 years old, and he had spent almost his entire life growing up inside North Korea's camp system. For a long time, he was introduced as the first known person born in Camp 14 who successfully escaped and shared his experience with the world. His story was published in the book Escape from Camp 14, written by journalist Blaine Harden. Because of this, Camp 14 became a global symbol of North Korea's political camps. However, it's important to mention a significant detail. In 2015, Shin Dong-hyuk himself admitted that some parts of his story were not true. According to his clarification, he did not actually stay in Camp 14 his entire life. He said that when he was 6 years old, he was transferred to Camp 18. He also shared that he tried to escape twice when he was a teenager, first in 1999 and again in 2001. According to his new account, after the second escape, he made it to China, but was eventually caught and sent back to North Korea, where he was taken to Camp 14 again as punishment. He also changed another important detail. At first, he said he was 13 years old when he experienced severe torture that left scars on his back. But later on, he said he was actually 20 years old when it happened. That's why it's important to carefully examine certain parts of the book written about Shin Dong-hyuk. Nevertheless, these changes in his testimony do not mean that Camp 14 does not exist. There are other testimonies from former guards and others who escaped from North Korea that describe how this system of political camps operates. Despite all of this, the government of North Korea continues to strongly deny the existence of these camps. To the regime, these stories are nothing but inventions, exaggerated accounts, or supposedly part of a global campaign to discredit and weaken their country. Of course, North Korea does not allow independent investigators free access to these places. There are no outside observers, no independent local or international media who can investigate inside the camps. Because of this, what the world knows about Camp 14 and how it is run mainly relies on satellite images and the testimonies of a few people who survived and successfully escaped. However, when separate accounts from different people at different times match in their descriptions of the methods, punishments, structures, and rules inside the camp, it provides a stronger basis to believe that these reports are true. In 2014, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea released a report. This commission concluded that there was enough evidence to state that crimes against humanity are taking place in North Korea. Among those presented in the report were allegations of extermination, enslavement, torture, arbitrary detention, and systematic persecution due to political beliefs. The report also describes the system of political camps as similar to some of the most notorious camps of the past century, including the Soviet gulags and Nazi concentration camps. Some may think that this kind of camp is just a part of history. But by 2026, there are reports saying that such systems still continue to exist. According to some estimates, around 80,000 people may be imprisoned in various political camps in North Korea. Of that number, it is estimated that more than 30,000 may be in Camp 14, although it is impossible to determine the exact number due to the lack of free access to these areas. Camp 14 and the entire Kwanli-Kwanli-sho system are considered one of the darkest parts of North Korea's security apparatus. It is a country that remains very closed off to the world, where only very little information gets out. And behind that silence, many observers believe that there are even graver truths that remain largely unknown to the international community. That is the entirety of this topic. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to Noel Polo TV, hit the notification bell, and share the video so more people can watch. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again in our next video.